Hello and welcome to another episode of the All Things Considered CX podcast. I'm your host, Bob Azman, and we're glad to have you back. We've been talking a lot about customer retention, customer loyalty, lifetime value, and a whole bunch of other subjects on recent podcasts. And so I'm really excited to have Emily Gray join us today as she brings not only a CX perspective, but a customer success perspective to the whole world of customer experience. So Emily Gray, welcome to the podcast, and please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So yes, I'm Emily Gray. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Playvox. So my role is really focusing on creating extraordinary experiences, right, for our customers, like at every touch point that they have with our organization. I lead our customer facing team. So that's customer support, solutions, delivery, and then onboarding, and then our customer success management team.
That's great, Emily. And I always ask this of my guests because I think it's always fascinating. Rarely, I think, do you hear young children say, I want to grow up to be a customer experience professional or a customer success professional. So what's your career path? How did you end up doing this?
Yeah, it's still funny when I try to explain to my young kids what I do, right? They're definitely not necessarily learning about that in school. So, I got into customer service very early in my career, and I've had many different roles. So kind of early on, I did a lot of kind of the back of the house, which I say, kind of that operations analyst role that you're supporting customers, but in that back of the house functionality. And then really moved into that front of the house, always with that end goal, like how can you enable customers to better use your product, whatever company I was working at, right? How can you enable customers to better use your product better? And at the end of the day, obtain better outcomes. So like I said, I've been in an operations role, I've been in a solutions consulting role, account management, which is, really more customer success today now that we're in, and all with those goals of like creating that customer experience. And that has changed. Like what a good customer experience looks like has changed a lot as well in the last, I'll say 15 years. And then, with a catalyst of the last, 3 years, just, being just accelerating beyond, I think where anyone thought it would go. But, really always focus on like creating advocates that, want to use your product, but then want to tell other people about your product. So I think customer service and customer experience it's a really broad term, right? And there's a lot of roles that go into that, but I'd say anything where you're interacting with customers, whether you're doing onboarding, whether you're doing, a contact center agent taking calls, it's all within that customer experience capacity. Now you've got that digital component that how do you bring a digital customer experience? And so there's a lot of different roles within this field. I will say too, that many of the roles that I've had, were first of its kind, what I like to say, where you start doing a job and you say, hey, there's nobody really to do this part of this experience that we need, or to take care of the customer in this way. So you just kind of add it to your plate and add it to your plate. And then eventually you've got so much that you say, you know what, we need somebody full-time to focus on this. And, I had a solutions consulting role early in my career that was kind of net new. I was the first solution consultant at the organization I was at. And so I think that's what I would like to tell people too, is think about the job that not that you want, but that nobody even has yet, right? Because there's going to be a need for that at an organization in the future. And then, you add into the technology and all the changes that we've had, post 2020, and then even just this year, that some of the technology changes that have become more mainstream. So there's jobs that are not even on the table yet. There's not even a job rec for, right? And so that's constantly changing. And so that's kind of been my journey. It's a lot of different roles, which has really kind of helped round me out and how I manage my team today, right? In regards to all the different tiers that I have within customer success, but it's that support, that onboarding. But I've done a lot of those roles at different points in my career and in different capacities. So it brings a really, I think, rounded experience to something that, again, all at the end of the day is like, how do you make the customer's life easier and help your customer?
Emily, it's really refreshing to hear you describe your background, because you've done those multiple roles. There was just a Wall Street Journal article about the CEO and some other members of the executive team of Uber that were actually driving vehicles and interacting with
Yeah.
passengers and hadn't done it before. And I was really impacted by that because I'm an advocate of, experience what your customers are experiencing, but also experience what your employees are going through, because oftentimes they can see the organization's blemishes sooner than anybody else can. And having that background that you have where you've done all those roles, that's got to really make you effective as a leader in your current role, because people can't point at you and say, well, you've never done my job. Well, you have, right?
Right. And that goes to like the difference of between, like sympathy and empathy, right? So when that a job is hard or you've got somebody on your team that's going through a situation, and being able to have actually, that level of empathy for them and then offer solutions, it also gives you a bit of credibility, right? A bit of credibility among your team of saying, hey, you know what, I might not do this job today, a day to day, and I, never going to kind of experience every single thing that you do, but I've done this in some capacity, and here are the experiences that I've had that then you can, I can kind of help translate and just be a leader in that sense. So it definitely, I think credibility is one thing that it brings, and how do you still stay involved? Like, it's easy as you kind of grow and manage a team to kind of get out of that, right? And like forget about the end customer. So for me, it's still really important to go and see our customers, right? And I would always tell anybody that in the customer experience role, if you haven't sat next to somebody using your product, or you haven't been in person talking to a customer about using your product, what they like about it, what they don't like about it, sometimes it's, even more valuable, right? And not just your decision maker, right, of who's purchasing your product or, signing the contract or whatever that might translate for you, but the actual end user. So in the example you just gave, right, of you're sitting and you're driving that car and you're talking to somebody that's in the back seat, right? I always encourage that, like, go and see customers and talk to the people that are using the product that you might not get to interact with, in any role, right, on a day-to-day basis. I think that's just it's just so important, and it can offer, it just helps you be a better leader, and it helps you give better insight that you can then bring back to the organization. And I think as a customer, anybody in customer experience, right, or customer success, like, our job is to bring that back to the other parts of the team. So whether it's finance, product and engineering, marketing, sales, there's a mix of people that, you could say all those roles interact with customers as well. They're all in some capacity. But as a customer experience executive and a leader, or a team member that's really focused on the end customer, that's what I always tell my team. Like, it's our job to filter that back. And a lot of organizations say customer first, which is something we do too, right? Because that's how it should be. But it's our job to make sure that that is permeated through the entire organization, is like customer first. And you only get that on all those different roles if you really do know what the customer is going through, and kind of have that cadence with them. So I can't stress that enough, is talk to customers. I try to talk to a customer every single day, in any capacity, right? Whether it's helping my team with someone or a one-on-one call. That's kind of my goal. It doesn't always happen every day, but that's kind of a goal that I have. And for my team too, right? Like, we should be talking to customers every single day, and then taking that knowledge and sharing it, because that's how you make the customer experience better, right? So
Absolutely. And by the way, Emily, before we go too much farther, because I want to unpack some of the things you just mentioned, but before we go too much farther, tell us a little bit more about what Playvox does.
yeah, so Playvox is, if you're not familiar with it, it's a cloud native, like, digital first software. So we help manage and empower our customers' workforce. So what that means is we provide solutions to contact centers all across the world that then help schedule their agents. They complete quality assurance, they train, they coach, they motivate their agents. So our customers, the customers of Playvox, are in the customer experience industry. So what that means is, one of the unique things about my role is I'm able to see the view as working with our customers, who they're then focused on customer experience. They're delivering, focused on kind of delivering those exceptional customer experiences and customer outcomes, right? They've got agents that are talking to customers on a day-to-day basis. Their metrics are CSAT, their metrics are, making sure that their end customers are having a good experience. And then on turn, myself leading a customer success team, focused on all those same metrics. So I have I definitely don't take that for granted. I have a very unique view of the world of customer experience, given that, that's the industry that Playvox is in, as well as, my role, like, having that team.
Excellent. So something you said, and we'll certainly talk more about Playvox as we go. Something you said really kind of was intriguing. You said, unless you're sitting next to your customer, knowing how the product works, and setting aside the pandemic for just a minute, where
Yeah.
travel wasn't allowed and all that kind of stuff, I just think that's so unique. And maybe I've got a tainted perspective here, but why don't you think more leaders don't do that? Why aren't more leaders visiting customers? And when I'm consulting with organizations, oftentimes I'll say, when was the last time you sat with a customer or talked to a customer? And many times the leaders haven't done it. What do you think is preventing them from that? Because you're certainly doing it as an executive and a leader. So you've got the formula down.
Yeah, I think it's well, customers in my job title, right? So it's like kind of a non-negotiable for me. I think for others that there's just a lot of priorities, right? Competing priorities, competing things, and it can get lost. And I think it's something that if you're not really intentional about and planning, and travel and getting customers to get that commitment, right? There's a lot of steps that have to go into that process. So it's how do you just be really, really intentional about making that happen. And again, for me, like, and a lot of folks, right, whether you're a director of customer operations or a director of or a VP of customer experience, right? You've got customer in your title. And so you're probably getting a view of that role of, what customers are saying. And even if it is like kind of filtered up, right, you're kind of hearing that more. But for those that customer experience is not just a problem within one department, right? Or a goal or a metric that's within one department. It's something that everyone in an organization needs to be thinking about, like at every single level. And some companies do that really, really well. And I think, to your question, I think people, there's competing priorities, right? There's sidetracks that happen. And, there's that concept of like leave an empty chair in the room, right? For your customer. And, making sure that the customer is in every conversation in every situation. So I think it's just being really intentional, and that might look different for everyone in a lot of different organizations. We try to share, customer stories across our team internally. Um, whether it's at an all hands or, it's that for how our product has maybe impacted somebody's life on a day-to-day basis, right? So it's like, there's going to be different compelling factors for everyone that really brings them closer to a customer. So if I'm an engineer, I might never have a chance to talk with a customer, right? I'm a software engineer, but if I see or I hear a story that a customer really loves a feature that I worked on, that can be really, really motivating and really compelling. And it's just bringing the customer back to the conversation. So I think that it's just how do you be intentional about that, and making sure that you have brought customers into the organization and for everybody, right? And again, that's going to look a little bit different, right? How do you get a software engineer to relate with a customer versus how do you get somebody in accounts payable to relate to a customer? Because everybody, let's be realistic, everybody can't go and sit next to a customer. But at an executive level, like it should be happening, and probably more than any of us do. I think, right? Any of us would want to admit. So
Yeah, it's really fascinating to hear you talk about that. I do some executive education at Rutgers, and one of the courses I teach is customer experience to engineers. And they say the exact thing you just said. I'm a software engineer. I don't touch the customer.
mhm.
So I don't know why I'm taking this customer experience module. And I think to myself, oh my gosh, we have to change something here when a software engineer doesn't think they touch the customer, because everything they produce, right, touches the
Right.
customer. And after we get through the module, there is kind of a conversion that takes place where they say, oh, I get it now. I always thought of the people that are touching the customer as sales or marketing or customer service, but you might be indirectly or not on the front line, but everything you do as a software engineer makes a difference in the customer experience.
Yeah, that's right. And like I said, I think it's going to be different for every department. So as a customer experience leader, so if you're leading a customer experience team, you know, how do you, like I said, like permeate that through the organization? And it's, how you might relate to a software engineer is going to be completely different than how you might relate to a CSM, right? So you might be talking about like feature functionality versus relationship building. And so I think that as an executive leading, we're a leader of a customer experience team. How do you get those conversations to happen internally and just, give a customer, like I said, give a customer a seat at your table and get your teams to just really like rally around that. And that's where, when you're able to do that, that's where people really align with like your vision, right? And making, whether you're making products or you're, pushing out, if you're a software engineer, right, kind of pushing out code or whatever you're doing, right? But really aligning around that vision of your organization and then that kind of end customer, and giving that customer like a persona is sometimes really helpful, right? So we met, I had the, I'll say pleasure and honor and all the things to go and meet with a customer last year in person, and it was really one of the first. It was in Europe, and it was one of the first customers that since the pandemic that we were able to like truly kind of sit down with. It was at the beginning of the year, and I was able to sit next to a young woman who was using our product every single day, and it was just for me even like it was just so amazing to see this, talk to this woman that was just in our software, in our solution, and talking about like just the impact that it's made on her day and like relate that. So I won't share her name here, but I kind of took that back to our team internally, and I shared her story, right, and gave her, and used her name. And so it's more than just, hey, the user of our product, or like our customer, but like the customers. And again, so you could translate this to whatever, whether you're B2B or B2C or whatever products that you're selling, right? There's still a person that's buying them and using them. And so I think being able to say, hey, to my team internally, right? Again, those people that don't have a chance to think about or to talk to customers on a daily basis, but to say, hey, here's the story of this woman. This is her story. This is her. Here's a picture of her, right? And this is how she was using our product, and this is how it made an impact on her. So that when you're developing those solutions, or you're sending out invoices, or if you're in legal and you're looking at a contract, whatever you're doing, you're kind of relating that more to a person. And I've seen some other brands, some B2C brands that have also done that really well. Like they've kind of give their customers personas, and some of that is internal language too, right? And you should kind of share those stories internally. And I think that's a big part of it when you talk about marketing, right? And marketing your customers and marketing that customer experience. A lot of that is, how do you do that really successfully internally too? So that people not just, you're not just doing case studies for prospects or potential clients, right? You're doing case studies internally, so people really can relate, to the customer, and like I'll tell you, like it does make a difference, right? It makes a difference if you've got that person, that is using your product, and you can, kind of put that in perspective. So one of the other things I did, just kind of lastly on that, is we had a internal meeting, and I pulled how many users we had, right, on our product at that given day, at that given time, that were logged into our product, into Playvox. And I found a stadium, I think it was a cricket stadium, and that housed that sat that many people, right? That how many users we had at that time in our product. So, I think when, as much as you can relate to people and say like, it's like, oh yes, we have customers, but like these are actual people that are sitting. Think about this stadium, and I had a picture of the stadium up on the screen. If you think about this stadium, this is full right now of all the people across the world that are using Playvox, right? That they are dependent on Playvox to get their job done. And the people in this room, right, the Playvox employees, like we're all powering all these people to do their jobs. So I think as much as you can, really put a personalization around it. And like I said, I'll go say this like repeatedly, like it's gonna look different for every organization. I wish there was a playbook to say at your organization, this might work. But so I think for a leader, again, like you've got to figure out how do you speak to your team members to really, get that customer experience across. And once you do, it will be like, it's a game changer, I think, when people kind of realize, what it really means to be customer first and what it really means to like let your customer have a seat at the table.
That's so true. And what I love about what you're doing is you're not just words, you're taking action, and that's so important because a lot of times it's it's a little bit like lip service, right? It sounds good to say we're putting the customer at the table, but then the customer's never there or we never had time to do it. And you're really doing that. And I think that's so important. You talked about visiting customers. What are you hearing from customers? What's are there trends, themes, things that you're hearing from customers as of late, as we emerge from the pandemic and all the other things that are swirling around in the markets right now?
Oh yeah, there's a lot, right? I think one of the things that's true right now is that customer expectations remain high, right? And so this is, again, no matter what industry you're in, like at the end of the day, like customer expectations are high. Every interaction matters. Keeping customers is very important right now as well, no matter kind of what business you're in, right? You really want to like wrap your hands around customers. So that's definitely something we're seeing. And we saw, for us to kind of like that end user customer, our customers, right? Looking at that perspective, many of our customers saw in early 2020 that like customer expectations, their customers, kind of that consumer, they were high. But what we're seeing is that they haven't subsided. So consumers are expecting fast, efficient service and often have much more complex inquiries. And in turn, that makes the agent, the customer care agent or the customer service representative, right? That makes their job more difficult. A lot of advancement and a lot of our customers, are using more automated technology, right? Chatbots and interactive virtual assistants and things like that. But what happens is, when you do that deflection and containment in that IVR or IVA or chatbot, it drives that, those more complicated interactions to agents. And so, how do you continue to provide that fast, efficient service to customers when those agents are getting more complex interactions? So, it kind of goes into the training for the agents, the coaching for the agents, how that looks different, and what, the people that are, talking to your customers, how do you train and support them differently? One of the big things, I'll say the second thing is that customer experience is definitely becoming a revenue driver. And, before I think we kind of sat in the cost center, right? But cost savings are essential no matter what business you're in right now, cost savings are essential. And so looking at CX as a revenue driver versus, again, that cost center, like that is a trend we're absolutely seeing. And so our customers are trying to optimize teams, ensure success with the agents you have. The phrase like do more with less is what we're hearing. I don't like that phrase because really that means put more work on on the same amount of people, right?
Right.
And so it's, like I always kind of caution that, but it's like, how do you actually prioritize, right? So instead of having a list of 10 things that 5 people are going to do, you've got a list of 5 things or 6 things that those people are going to do, right? So it's not necessarily do more with less. It's really like ruthless prioritization. We're seeing that with customers as well. I think a big piece is like, having the right people in the right place at the right time to take those interactions is really, really important. And then, like I mentioned, the coaching, like always taking it back to the person, like how do you provide relevant coaching as close to the event as possible? How do you have the tools, automation in place to help, really your agents succeed? I think another piece of that is data. If you kind of think about 5 years ago, had all this data, and big data was like a really hot word, right? And you had all this data about customers, and customers at some point they didn't like that, right? They said like, how do you know so much about me? And so that was a sensitive line. I think a lot of organizations had to play is they didn't want, to come across as we have got all this data about you, because the customers were still a bit weary about that. But now what we're seeing is they know that we've got all their data. So now they expect us to use it. They expect us to know, what brands they like. They expect us to know the time that they like to interact. They expect us to know the channel. They expect, companies that they're interacting with to have all the context of, hey, I contacted you 6 months ago and this is what happened, right? They expect all of that. They don't want to repeat themselves. And so what happens is an agent now, right? They're expected to be able to have that data and then or a consumer expects an agent to have that data. And so I think that's a trend too that we're seeing with our customers is um, how do they get that data to the agent in a relevant way so that they can have meaningful conversations with a customer, right? There's sometimes so much data, but being able to like really tee up the best data that's going to provide the best experience for that customer, I think is really, really important. So we're seeing that that with customers, but again, it all goes back to the agent. How do you make sure you got the right people in the place at the right time? How do you provide relevant coaching? Excuse me, coaching is something that we've just seen, I think has become more and more prevalent over the last 12 to 18 months. And I think we'll see that here as well as especially a lot of our customers are, looking at AI, they've got some AI solutions in place. They don't really know how they want to use it. They know they need it, right? And so that's probably a whole nother series we could talk about is AI and what that means for some of our customers and the journey that they're having with that. But that's, those are some of the I'll say kind of top things. And to round it out is CSAT continues to be like important for our customers, right? It's balancing those customer expectations again with the operational efficiencies that they're trying to get. So it's a not an easy job, I think, for anybody that's kind of in a CX leader in a CX role right now of, how do you balance great customer experience with creating operational efficiencies, potentially cutting costs, still having tools and solutions needed to support your agents, support your customers, all with, creating a great work environment. There's a lot, right? A lot coming at this industry. I think, personally, I think that this industry saw some of the most changes from, there's probably, kind of a couple others we could put in that mix, but definitely in the top there of saw some of the most changes from the events of 2020 and like some of the catalysts. And there's a lot of data to support that of just, the number of interactions and how people interact, kind of like I was saying, and what they expect. Those trends were going in that direction, but it's just the last 3 years have just been an absolute catalyst for, getting to us, to where we are today. So
I think everything you've said is what I'm hearing as well. And you're right, we probably could spend another podcast just talking about AI. But your approach about, it's got to change from thinking of it as a cost center to a revenue center is so imperative. And I talk to so many CX practitioners like yourself that are, trying to prove the value of customer experience. And I keep going back to the fact that it has to be culturally a shift in mindset that says this can generate profit and revenue. It doesn't have to be cost. And then to your very valid point, but there is a balance there. And so I just sometimes think the pendulum swings one way or the other. We're either cutting all the costs, as we saw with customer experience during the pandemic, or we're swinging the other way where we're investing in it and not considering the cost element. So very, very important comments that you made. Emily, the last thing I ask our time just flew by, and I really appreciate your time today. The last question I ask all of our guests is any final words of wisdom, but you've had so many great words of wisdom during our podcast. I'm not sure you have any left, but just in case, I'll ask that same question if you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners.
I think thanks. I appreciate that. Yes, it's been time has flown. I think that at the end of the day, a great employee experience translates to a great customer experience. And that concept of AX equals CX, and I strongly believe in that. We've got, for me personally, I've got a fantastic team of within my customer success team, and having a good employee experience for those individuals within my team absolutely translate to a great customer experience. So as much as your customer experience is really important, it all is very intertwined, right? So making sure that the folks that are talking to your customers, the folks that are solving their problems, that are kind of on the front lines, like I like to say, making sure that they're having a good experience absolutely will translate to customer experience. And that's something that you can measure, right? So anything that you can measure, anything that kind of brings data to customer lifetime value, always is really, really relevant. So it's a great concept of kind of that employee experience equals great customer experience.
Well, Emily, this has been great, and those are additional words of wisdom. I really appreciate your time today, listeners. Emily Gray from Playvox. Emily, how can our listeners get a hold of you if they want to learn more, not only about
Yeah.
Playvox, but some of your leadership principles?
Yeah, definitely. Feel free to follow Playvox on LinkedIn. Send us a message there. We've got a chat within our website. So if somebody wants to chat directly with our team, you can chat with us at playvox.com. Definitely, you can find me on LinkedIn. I always love talking and connecting with people within this industry. So at all different levels and locations throughout the world. So absolutely, don't be shy. Just drop me a note on LinkedIn. Let me know that you listen here, and I'd be happy to connect with you there.
That's great. Emily Gray from Playvox, thank you for joining the podcast. And listeners, this has been another episode of the All Things Considered CX podcast. I'm your host, Bob Azman. As always, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your networks and listen to my colleagues across the CXFM radio network for other great podcasts. Until our next episode, thank you.